Hello everyone, my name is Prabhat and in this tutorial I am going to teach you how can you create a dark mode button in Lightning Web Component. And this button can be used to enable your Lightning Web Component in dark mode, or maybe you can go back to normal mode to dark mode or dark mode to normal mode. So let me show you how it works. So there is a button called dark mode, and if I toggle it, it is going to the normal mode, and again if I am toggling it, it will go to the dark mode. So in this tutorial I'll show you how can you create a dark mode functionality for your Lightning Web Component, which can be useful for your projects, because these functionalities like the dark mode functionalities are being provided by almost major websites, social media websites like Twitter, Facebook. They all have these features enabled, so you may use this to enable this feature in your org as well. So let's start. So I am at the VS Code, and in this VS Code I have created one file, LWC component called dark mode, and which has 3 files. Remember, whenever you create a LWC component, you will have 3 files by default. One is the HTML, the second one is the JS, and the third one is your configuration file, also called XML file. So the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to my HTML file, and in this file what I'm going to do, I'll simply define a div tag, and inside a div tag I'll define one h1 tag, and inside the h1 tag I'll write something like this: enable dark mode. I'll save it, and one more configuration I need to do, I'll make is exposed true so that our component will be visible in the Salesforce. And I'll define targets. I'll just close the targets, and inside the target I'm going to define where this component is going to show up. For now I want this component to show up on a Lightning tab. Okay, so I'll define target, and then I'll close target. Okay, and here I'll just define lightning underscore tab. I'll just push the changes. Oh, that's great. Now go head back to your Salesforce org, and this Salesforce org I'll just go to the setting, and in setting I'll go to the tabs. So now your LWC component can be referenced in tabs. So I'll open this tab. You need to scroll down, and you can see here Lightning component tab, Lightning page tab, web tabs. These are the other options. For me, I'm going to use a Lightning component tab. I'll click new. I'll simply name it dark mode. This is the name. I'll give a style. Let's see what kind of style I can give. I'll give cup. Description is optional, you can leave it blank. And then you need to select your component. So we created a component called dark mode, see here, and just click next. I leave it default on for all the profiles. Okay, that's great. Now we should be able to get our tab here. What I'll do, I'll add to the my tab. So here I'll type dark mode, add to navigation, and I'll just drag it up so that I can see it here. So now we have a dark mode tab, and we have our dark mode in lightning component, which we have defined here. Okay, now our next thing is the checkbox. So here what you see only the text. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a checkbox. So to get the code for the checkbox, you can just type checkbox toggle in Lightning Design System website. I'm gonna copy this code and I'll just paste it. One more thing I'm gonna do, I'll just wrap it inside a div so that we can change if we needed the background color, and I'll just push it to org, and I'll go back here, and if I refresh it, you should be able to see the checkbox as well. See, so now we are done with our, now we need to put some styling so that it looks better. So to put the styling, what we are going to do, we are going to add a file dark mode.css, and here we'll do all our styling to look it better. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do, we are going to define a background color. So in the div tag, just define the class, and the class name would be background color. So I'll call it bg body. Okay, and here we'll go and we'll reference that bg body, and quickly we will define some property. So what property I need to define? So we'll define width. I'll keep 98 pixel. Then I'll define height, and that would be close to 600 pixel. You may define as you desire. For background color, for me, I'll make it white for now. And the text alignment, I want everything should be in the center. Okay, I'll save it, and I'll just push it to see if the CSS has been applied or not. And if I refresh it, you may see some changes. Let's see what are the changes. See, so we are able to see the dark mode. We are able to see the background color, and also this heading is aligned to the center. There is one more thing, I think what we need to do, just copy paste and put this inside. Let's push it. Great. So we have now right. So we'll do some configuration like styling for heading. Just wrap this inside a div, and I'll just pick this and I'll put inside a div. So it is now inside a div, and I'll define a class, and this class should be slds text align underscore center. So what it is going to do, it is standard Salesforce lighting design class, and this class will make sure that this h1 tag should align in the center. One custom class also I need to define. I'll name it header, and inside this header we are going to make some changes to look it much better. Okay, so let's define some font or some other thing. So for header I'll define font size 4 VW and font weight this would be bold. Let's see how it looks now. Now we have a beautiful heading, lightning dark mode and lightning web component. It happened because of this CSS. Now next thing we need to do, we need to do some alignment for checkbox so that it should align in the center of the page. So what we need to do to align this into center of the page? So what I'm gonna do, so maybe here the first thing we need to change to dark mode, the label. So now label is showing toggle label, but now it will show dark mode, and we don't need this. Here I'll define my custom class and I'll name it checkbox button. And now what we are going to do, I'm going to access this, show you. Okay, so what we are going to write this inside this to align it to the center. So I'll write 500 pixel the width of my checkbox, and I'll just put left 520 pixel, and I'll define some margin top which will make sure some distance between the heading and the checkbox. So 30 pixel margin top. I'll save it and I'll just push it to the Salesforce. So now let's refresh it. Let's see what are the changes which has happened. Oh, it looks great. But why the dark mode is showing somewhere else? So what we did, we were using this not on the parent div, instead we were using in a span. That's why it was not, we were seeing this issue. Now if I refresh it, you should be able to see the well aligned button. So now we are done with our CSS styling. The heading looks bold, aligned in the middle of the page, and then we have a dark mode. This is also aligned in the middle of the page. Now the next task is to add some JavaScript code to enable or disable it as dark mode. So now next thing is, do you see this input box? Here we will add one event, on click event. What does this mean by one click? Means whenever we do checkbox click, an event is going to be fired, and that event is going to take care of enabling dark mode of the lightning page. So I'll just name it handle dark mode. So this is our function, and in this function we can just move to the JavaScript code, and inside the dark mode class we can define this function. And for testing purpose, let's put some alert, and here some text: dark mode button clicked. I'll push it, and if I'll refresh it, and once you click here, it is going to show one alert box: dark mode button clicked. See? So now our next task is, whenever we will click the dark mode, we are going to convert our page in the dark mode whenever someone is clicking on the dark mode. Got it? Okay. So for this, what we need to do, we need to get actually this entire page, and whenever the user is going to click on dark mode, it should change the background color to black or maybe the dark. I'll call data ID so that we can get this entire parent div, and we can make change accordingly in our JavaScript controller. And I'll just name it bg body day. And what we are going to do, we are going to get the reference of the data whenever we will click on this checkbox. Okay, so there is one more method I'm going to create, and that would be dark mode method. Dark mode method, and in this method I am going to handle if the checkbox is enabled, we are going to convert entire page in the dark mode. So what we are going to do, we are going to get the reference of div. I'll just use query selector. Okay, so this is how you can write in Salesforce to get the reference of your data ID. So to get the reference, you can write something like that: data -id equal whatever ID you have defined. So what ID I have defined? I have defined this ID. So what it is going to do, it will get, right now the class of this ID is bg body, right? Now whenever what we want, whenever the dark mode is enabled, I am going to change the class, and it is going to change the styling of entire page. So to change the class name, I'll just define it, let's define it header dark. And this class you need to call it from here whenever the button is closed. So I'll just need dark method. Okay, so understand what is happening here. So whenever this button is clicked, okay, whenever you click this button, it is going to get all this div component, and what it will do, based on that ID, it will get entire div component, div section, and it will change the class name. So right now the class name is bg body. If you go to the CSS, and this bg body is basically what exactly it is doing, it is setting these properties to the CSS. The background color is white, these all things it is doing. Now whenever the button is checked, means we need to enable the dark mode. So to enable the dark mode, we are going to make some changes. So what we are going to do, we are going to change simply the class. I'll show you what would happen, what happens when you change the class. So let's make it background color as blue. So what is happening here, whenever the user is clicking this, it is going to change the background color of this page to blue. And how it is getting changed, whenever you click on this checkbox, it is getting the ID of the div and then changing the class name. It simply means this class name would be changed to hello dark whenever you clicked on the checkbox. So let me deploy the code. So now if you click here, see the background is getting changed to blue, and that's the magic. Okay, so you just saw how we were able to change the background color when you check the checkbox, right? So let's do some CSS configuration. Let me go to the CSS file, and for now what I'll do, I'll make the background color as black, as we are playing with the dark mode, so it should be black. Okay. Font weight, whenever we create the checkbox, I want the font weight should be bold. What are the color of the text should be white, because by default it is black, and if you don't change the color when the checkbox is checked, you won't be able to see that text. And the same way we need to define the font size, and the font size I'll define for VW. Is there any other? Yeah, definitely we need to define width, and width would be, there won't be any change in the width and height. Okay, and there won't be any change of alignment of the text. Save it and now push it. Now we'll see what happens when we clicked on the checkbox. Let's go there and then click on enabled. See, our dark mode is working fine. The only thing which is not working, when you disable it, it should go back to the normal mode, right? We'll see how can you do that. Should go back to the normal mode. To get it back to the normal mode, what I'm going to do, I'll just copy this, and there would be one more class I'll define, and maybe I'll make it body gday, and it would be same as this. But what happens now, when you click enable, this should return as a true. When you click disable, it should return a false. So what we are going to do, whenever we will enable, we will assign this class so that it will be the dark mode, and whenever we disable, it is going to assign this class to disable the dark mode, right? So there is one more thing we need to do. We need to pass the event just to check if it is enable or disable. I'm talking about the checkbox, if it is enable or disable. Okay, so how can you check that? Okay, so I'll define one variable and I'll call it is dark mode. Okay, and in this dark mode, I'll just define is dark mode equal to target, sorry, it will be event dot target dot checked. So what it is going to do, it is going to give me value if it is the checkbox is checked or not. If it is checked, it is going to return true, and if it is not checked, it is going to return false. So in this case, what I'm going to do, what I'll do this, I'll pass here is dark mode, and here we'll simply pass dark mode. What do we need to do? So whenever this dark mode is true, right? So I'll write one if condition, if dark mode equal to, sorry, dark mode is true, then just enable the if the dark mode is true, you need to enable the dark mode, else just come back to the normal mode. So I'll just copy this, and to copy this, I'll change this class to our normal class, and that would be this one. Right, now it should work as dark mode and normal mode. So once you refresh this, let me refresh it. Okay, now when I click on this dark mode, it is going to be enabled, and when I disabled it, it is going to switch back to normal mode. See, you can do it. That's great, awesome. Okay, there is one more thing we need to add some animations so that it looks better, right? So to add the animation, I'll just go to our CSS file, and here in all this class I'll add transition to 1 second, and I'll make it all in the header component as well as here also, and also in the header also. Just save it. Now we will have, if I'll refresh it, if I refresh it, and if I click, the user has enabled dark mode for his Lightning Web Component. And what if he logs out and then he come back? It, as he has already enabled in the dark mode, it should rendered as dark mode. or maybe he has enabled dark mode when he is going to refresh it. So it should rendered as a dark mode only, because let's see, I have enabled the dark mode, and if I refresh it, it should render as dark mode only, right? For this, to enable this functionality, what we are going to do, we are going to use a JavaScript local storage functionality. So what we are going to do, whenever the user click on handle dark mode, we will use local storage. So basically this local storage is going to save your setting in your browser, and I'll just set item to set the item, and key value pair you need to define. Let's say I want to define, let's say, last name, and then you can define something like last name Kumar, and if you want to get this value, you can just get it. So for me, that would be dark mode checkbox, and if it is true or false based on this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to define this dot is dark mode. So what is happening here? So whenever user, let me push it. So what is happening here? So whenever user is clicking on dark mode on the checkbox, it is going to set that specific preference to the local storage, so that whenever if he is refreshing the browser, it is not going to change because he has already saved the preference. So let's see how this works. Dark mode. Now this local storage has been set as true because it is true, and if I refresh it, it is coming back to the normal mode. Why it is happening? Because when you are refreshing it, the page is loading again. So we need, whenever the page is getting loaded, we need to get the last saved value, and based on that value we need to set the dark mode, right? So whenever you refresh the page, there is a LWC lifecycle hooks. I have already made video on that. You can go and check. What we need to do, we need to call a rendered callback. So just rendered callback. So whenever you refresh the browser, so whenever you refresh the browser, it is going to call this method. So in this method only we are going to check what was the last setting set by the user. Okay, so what I am going to do, I am going to declare one more variable. I'll call it dark mode setting, and what I am going to do, whatever the user last time set the setting, I'll just get that json.parse and then local storage dot get item, and we defined this. Now in this variable we have value of last saved item. If it is last time the user has enabled the dark mode, then it should be true, and if it user has disabled, it would be false. So based on that, just check if this dot dark mode setting not equal to null, then what I'm going to do, this dot dark mode method, I'm going to call this method and set the dark mode method okay. So let's call this dot dark mode setting. So whenever you reload the page, it is going to check what was the last setting for the dark mode, and based on that the page will be rendered. Okay, so let's save it. Now let's enable it. Page is loaded, and if I enable the dark mode and if I refresh it, as the local storage variable has already saved my last setting, it is going to re-rendered in dark mode only. It is not going to change in the normal mode. So based on the setting, it is going to re-render in the dark mode only. See, one more thing, let's say I just log out. The user has just logged out. Let me log out. So let's log in. Log in. And if I'll navigate to the sales app, and I'll go to the dark mode tab, see, it is actually saved the last setting. The only thing we need to take care, this one is by default rendering as default, and to overcome this we need to define one more variable called a checked. Okay, and this variable would set as per our this dot dark mode setting. So if it is if dark mode is enabled, so basically this button should also be enabled, and this I am going to use this in our HTML code. So here you can define one attribute called checked, and then you can just define whatever we. So now we are almost done with dark mode functionality. Let's refresh it. And if I disable it and if I refresh it, it is not going to change to the dark mode. And if I enable the dark mode setting and if I refresh it, it is still going to show as a dark mode in Salesforce. So this is how you can create for your existing Lightning Web Component to add some extra functionality to enable those components as a dark mode or the normal mode, or you can use it to enable as a dark mode. Thank you so much for the watching video.